Hello, molecular visualizers, and welcome back. In this section, we are going to set the stage for our biomolecule. And also in this section, it will be the first time that we are actually going to work with the THREE.js library. And all of that magic is going to happen right in here in this create 3D viewer function that we created earlier. I guess we will no longer need this placeholder message. I'm just going to create a little bit of space here. And the first thing that I would like to do is to call three more functions that we're going to define shortly. One of them I will simply call init. And then there's another one which will basically take care of the menu here and tie those HTML elements to our JavaScript code and make sure that we can interact and click on these menu items and then interact with our biomolecule. And then the third function here I am going to call animate. And I will tell you what it will do in a minute. So I'm doing these three function calls here, but then obviously we need to declare the function somewhere. So I'm just basically setting this up down here. And we will need three of those. So this one will be the activate menu one. And our last one is called animate. So let's first talk a little bit about this animate function, because it's going to be a little bit of a magical function. Because what we need here is a function called request animation frame. And this function takes one argument. That's basically another function. And what I'm doing here seems very confusing. I'm basically setting up a recursive call within animate. So what does request animation frame do? It's a function that the browser already knows about, and it basically just says, hey browser, once you're done rendering the current page, once you're free to do more stuff, call my argument. Now I'm feeding in animate function again. So this function will be called over and over again as soon as the browser is free. And we obviously hope that that will be fluent enough for some smooth animations and for a smooth user experience. So I can show you how this works just by, again, using our friend console log. And I'm just going to write out some nonsensical words here. And let's deal with activate menu and init later. I just want to save that and then refresh the page over here and see what we get. So now you see we get this yay message here from our console log, and you can see this counter here that basically shows you the repeats of how many times this has been written out. That just keeps increasing at a very fast rate. So if you're lucky, this is about 60 frames per second, which should be reasonably smooth for animated 3D content. So our animate function will be called over and over again after all this init stuff here has been called. So next, I'm going to define some variables up here. And I'm declaring 5 variables up here for the one and only reason that I want all the other functions here, namely init, activate menu, and animate, I want them to be able to access these variables. So if I would define them within, let's say, init in here, and then I want to make a reference to something that I define in here and animate, we will get an error because it won't be able to know what we're talking about. So we need to do that outside of those 3 functions, but I'm just doing it within this create 3D viewer function. Basically everything that happens from now on will happen in here. So we will need a camera that we will define with THREE.js. We will need a scene. We will need a renderer. We will need some controls for the camera. And I also need to declare my surface here, which is actually this surface that we can toggle later, because the menu, both the init and the menu function will need to know about the surface. So I just declare this out here. And then there is a small little helper function that I'm going to define now. And I'm going to call it getDim, just for short for get dimensions. And this function, whenever it is called, I am going to return a object. If you remember, if we just start defining something with curly brackets, we will get an object. And this object is going to have two properties, a width property and a height property. And the width is going to be measured like so. Container.offsetWidth. And the height down here, what I want for my 3D viewing box over here is I want an aspect ratio of 4:3. So all I'm doing right here is I'm basically doing that same measurement again, and I'm multiplying it by 0.75. So what is container? Container is an argument of my create 3D viewer function. So it needs to be called with the proper argument. So let's go see, where did we call it? We called it up here, right, in our event listener, once we're sure that all our HTML content has loaded. And for the argument of this create 3D viewer function, I'm passing in document.getElement by ID WebGL. So basically, I feed in a element that has an ID WebGL. And if you remember, that was that empty div that we created here somewhere. Right here, we gave that an ID WebGL, and it's an empty div. But now our create 3D viewer will take that empty div as an argument and then inject fancy stuff into it with THREE.js. So what I'm doing here in my getDim helper function, I'm basically just measuring, wait, how much width do we actually have available in this div? And then whenever I call getDim, it will give me the proper dimensions for my box here. So inside my init function, so the init function will only be called once whenever we load the page, which we can see here. Same for activate menu, which we will deal with a little bit later. But animate will be called over and over again, as we just saw by DZA messages, where we already have 16,000 of them. So in init, the first thing I want to do, I'm going to define a variable dim. So I'm basically just storing that return value that I got from getDim in a variable dim, so we can access it later. And we only need to make one function call here. And I'm also going to put some comments from time to time here, so we actually know what we're doing and we won't forget. So here I'm just basically getting the initial dimensions. And now we are ready to introduce our wonderful THREE.js library. Stay tuned.